Alrighty.
Okay.
We're gonna pause for a minute here. Take our deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Okay.
All right.
Going.
Straighten our hair. Smile. Welcome everybody. So excited about our guest today because I am starting to know my audience, and just such an honor to have so many of you week after week watch Beauty Matters and comment and share. And so I kind of know your stories. One thing I've really realized about our audience, Rosie, is we are predominantly women who have lived life and gone through transition.
Oh, yeah.
And when you go through transition, I know for myself, there is always grief and there's always loss, even in the best circumstances. Isn't that true? I was reflecting on this on my way over here, and you know, I had 2 sons that got married last year, and it was so exciting and so wonderful.
Yeah.
But there is this aspect of loss, isn't there, in the very, very best of circumstances.
Sure.
And as I invited Rosie, hi you guys, and thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna, if you have any questions for Rosie, comment down below, let us know where you're from. I know this is going to just hit a lot of good nerves today. And having said that, I also know that we're not going to be able to cover everything in 20 minutes. So I'm telling all of you, we will be having Rosie back, okay? So having said that, before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to hear a little bit about your story, what brought you to this place, and kind of how you have transitioned and evolved as a professional and as a woman who does this kind of work.
Yeah. Well, what brought me was I primarily worked with addiction for many years. And what I found was that I was doing we were doing grief work, but we were doing it in all the traditional ways. And until it hit me personally, I mean, I could just reiterate all the books that I've learned and show you what I, academical. But when it hit me personally is when I found that I had to do my own work deeper, and that grief was such a big thing. I had no idea on how much it was going to transform my life and bring me to really embrace this and want to do this work.
Wow. So was there anything, are you comfortable sharing a little bit? So you're working all these years in addiction, and addiction in and of itself has a huge loss and grief component. That's a whole nother topic we'll have to sit down for, right?
Absolutely.
So you worked through that, and then you really were doing these traditional modalities, and then because of your own work, if I understand you correctly, you kind of learned it wasn't enough. Is that correct? So, yeah.
I realized that it was a Band-Aid. I did a lot of Band-Aid on my grief work. And I think, unfortunately, in our community, in our world, we do Band-Aids, because we know only what we know. Yeah. And we can't do anything different until we learn something different. And so we embraced a lot of things that were taught to us that relatively were actually survival skills, actually for all intents and purposes, looked like it was working, but I didn't realize how much it acted out on my grief from not dealing with the deeper stuff.
Wow. So what changed? What happened? What kind of work did you start doing?
What happened was my mom passed away, and we were her caregiver for many years. And I had ran from my dad's death. I thought I'd done the traditional counseling. I thought I was good to go. I went on antidepressants. I did all that. And what I ended up with my mom's death, it was basically, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Wow.
I had years of taking care of her. My husband and I took care of her. We actually moved her here to Temecula. And I hadn't realized that I had been grieving her 5 years prior to her death.
Wow.
That grief was not about just the death. It was about so much more. We can grieve years before somebody dies. We can grieve a relationship that's healthy. We can grieve that relationship. I mean, people don't realize, but grief has so many components to it. Like you mentioned about your children's wedding. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. It's happy. You're seeing them going forward. It's lovely. and it's something every mama wants to see, right?
Yes, yeah.
But
especially when you get great daughter-in-laws, which I have.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But the relationship's going to change.
Yes.
Because now you have another component in this relationship. You have daughter-in-laws who you love and cherish, right? And you're blessed to have wonderful ones, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we do, you know?
Yeah.
But you get that blessing. But the thing is your relationship with your children, they're now adults. It's like you talk about transition. Oh my gosh, there's full of grieving over that when it's even joyful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit into the nitty gritties. And I think what I want to do today is really kind of do an overview. So when we talk about grief, there's the obvious, you know, somebody dies, but grief extends into so much more than that. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways that grief shows up in people's lives that maybe aren't so obvious, but can really just bring them down?
Well, different ways that people that show up grief is, you know, we talk about a lot of times, you know, the change, because grief is really about conflicting feelings, right?
Yes, that is so profound.
That conflicting feelings.
Yep.
And it's a familiar pattern of behavior, a change of it. So it can be just changes. It could be changes to your job because it's a great job, but you're changing what you used to do. Maybe you were at a company for 20 years and you knew it like the back of your hand. Then you go to this new exciting career or change. It's all new. Well, you're going to grieve or you're going to miss that familiarity of the last one, of being top dog.
Right.
And now you have to start learning all from square one. That can be a grief issue. A grief issue is your children move out the empty nest. That even though you've been waiting for them to move and you wanted to create that room, that special room, you walk by there and you remember all the memories you had, all the changes that are going to happen. You're not going to, you know, be getting up for school.
And Rosie, stop there for a minute, because I feel like that's a really particularly vulnerable time, and maybe it's sort of because where I'm at is, you know, we hear that term sandwich generation. So you're kind of dealing with grief on both ends, right?
Yes.
You're transitioning out of being the mommy that's bringing your kids all over, but you also have this other end where you're dealing with aging parents. Right?
Exactly. And that's exactly, I'm glad you brought that up. That's exactly where we were with my mom.
Yeah.
I was a sandwich generation. My kids were 14 and 7 when she died, and I was trying to take care of them and go to the sports, but yet I was here at home. I couldn't leave a lot of times, and I was taking care of an elderly, and I was taking care of a young child. And it was really a hard, tough thing to do, and trying to do a career.
Wow, yeah.
That was juggling. Yeah.
So a lot of areas where grief, and really, do you use grief and loss synonymously, would you say?
I do. And one of the things I realize is too is what we grieve is our identity.
Interesting.
It's like, who am I when my mom passed away? Who am I now? Who am I when my kids are growing up? Or, you know, who am I when I have to take a sabbatical from my job? You know, that identity that we wrap.
Who am I when I get a divorce?
Who am I when I get divorced?
Yeah, I've always been the Mrs., right? Now who am I?
Who am I?
Yeah. Wow.
So there's a lot of things, you know, and what I notice about with grief and loss is that it's probably the number one thing that I felt the most lowest of self-esteem when I was going through it.
Oh, interesting.
It rocks your boat. It rocks your foundation.
Okay.
It's a powerless feeling like no other.
That's just such a great visual when it's like that earthquake movement where it's like, where do I land? And probably just in that sense of not knowing where you're going to land is part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can't change. That's something when you go through a loss, it's unchangeable, right?
Right. Right.
It's something that you can't. I mean, we're so used to in our society. We can change it. Yeah. I am woman, see me roar.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and also is one of the things you were saying earlier that made me think, we like these Band-Aids you were talking about. And I think it's like we look at this as, okay, I'm fixed now. Band-Aids on, I'm better, when really so much of life is process, is it? And I'm wondering, in your experience with grief, it's like the feelings don't go away, right? I mean, ever, probably. I mean, how do you work through that?
Well, it's like exactly, you know, when I'm talking about my mom. Now, do I get sad at anniversaries? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Do I have joy? Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that happens is if we're able to grieve normally and go through the process, we can still feel sad and joy, but we can still, we can embrace it. It doesn't own us. It doesn't put us in a little ball and say, oh my gosh, where's my purpose in life?
Right.
It gives you another level,
Yeah.
a new life, but we're never going to forget that person.
So going that place where you're curled up in a ball, talk to us a little bit about how does grief show up? I mean, obviously that's a real obvious one, but maybe what are some of the not so obvious ways?
Grief shows up, of course, as you know, depression, right?
Yeah.
But grief also shows up in anger.
Oh, interesting.
People get into their anger. It's kind of, anger is an emotion that it's a secondary for most part. And usually underneath is grief, sadness, betrayal, all that.
Yes.
And so anger is our go-to for a lot of people because it's an empowering feeling.
And it's not vulnerable,
It's not
right? It's not vulnerable. It puts the wall up rather than putting the wall down.
So a lot of times we'll see people that will be really angry, and underneath there's a lot of losses. There's a theory people say. I love this statement. It says, "Hurt people hurt people."
Oh wow, that is really, really powerful.
And so when you have that deep sadness and then you're covering up, it will show up in anger. It will show up in busyness.
Wow.
It will show up in somebody trying to be strong. It will show up on somebody being, trying to fix other people.
Yeah.
Because they don't.
You're deflecting.
Deflecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe there is a part of it where if you can make someone else feel better, then you do get some accolades to make yourself. So again, it's that Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid.
Okay, so we're talking about Band-Aids covering up. Let's talk about the root. What are some of the steps you can do to deal with grief?
First of all, you have to be able to ask for help.
Okay.
I always say that our minds, and our internalizing our feelings go into our head. It's a bad neighborhood nobody should be alone in.
Say that again. I love that.
It's a bad neighborhood nobody should be alone in.
When you're alone in that.
When you isolate. Grievers have a tendency to want to be alone. I'm going to figure this out by myself. I don't want people to see it because there's a shame component, which is very interesting for people with grief.
Very interesting.
So they won't talk about it, or they won't ask for help, or they don't want to bother people. And those are like those mistaken belief systems that we're bothering people. Or if I tell you how I really feel, you might shut down and not come talk to me anymore because you're like, I might scare you.
Which is true for people who are friends, or the people that are around you.
Right.
It is uncomfortable because we don't know what to say. We don't know what to ask. We don't know how to be, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And the society right now that we have, or we've had for many years, we're the fix-it society, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so we think grievers need to be fixed. So what can I do to change your feeling?
Yeah.
Which really is actually the opposite. What I need to embrace is I need to let you feel.
Yeah.
Because you need to process, and you need to be able to journal and talk to somebody and to have somebody safe that will not be the quick, let me get you the Band-Aid.
Right.
Let me just honor your feelings.
So you have to get help.
You have to get
And you have to probably recognize that you are grieving.
Right.
Even own that, right? Say,
or
I'm
like
hurting. I'm hurting.
Or like you said, sometimes people don't know they're grieving, but so how does it show up?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it shows up where, you're angry all the time and people are talking about your anger. Maybe you need to go talk to somebody that's a grief specialist that can maybe find out that it's really not anger. There's a root to it.
Yeah.
Because so many times we send them to anger management, and all you learn is how to control your anger. Well,
which doesn't deal with the root
doesn't
problem,
deal with the
right?
root.
And I'm sure it'll pop up in some other way, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or if you've got, you're exhausted and you keep going, and people say, I'm really concerned. You're really busy a lot. What's going on for you? And maybe having a cup of coffee with somebody might discover, oh my gosh, what has changed in your life?
Yeah.
And you start to know, I need some help because you know what? I've been going through a lot.
Yeah. Now that to me seems sometimes a little bit hard to differentiate because we are such a society that just prides ourselves on, it's like this badge of honor, I'm the busy one. So is that like, if it's different than your normal pattern, or like how would you know that?
I see it when people like overschedule. I was one of those. Overschedule, and I still have to work on that at times. And I find, when you have, family in your life says, you think you're like over scheduling, or you think you're doing too much, or you find yourself like things are falling through the cracks. Well, it means maybe you're a little too busy. What's going on here? Have you had some things that you're kind of not wanting to deal with and not even realizing?
Right. Right.
Oh yeah, my daughter's going through a tough time right now. What's going on for you?
Yeah. And even something like that is a loss, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Your kids are everything to us.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So what does healing look like? Or what is your I love the name of healing our heart. So what does a healed heart look like?
A healed heart is somebody that is able to share their feelings, their thoughts, and to process it, and to get to a place where there's a new, a lot of people I deal with don't like that word new normal. The new normal. They don't want the new normal.
They want the old normal.
They want the old normal. But when you process your feelings, it heal that, because it's got to be validated.
Yeah.
It's got to be heard by an open heart, open ear person to honor that. That's the healing. When you cut your leg and you have this gash and you allow it, you get your stitches or you go to the doctor or whatever, and it heals naturally and normally. You let the process happen.
Yes.
And so your journey in grief is not where some people used to think it just goes up and down. You go through all these stages.
Right,
boom, boom, boom.
like stages of grief.
Right?
Sure.
And, you go all over the place. And sometimes your journey is like this, and sometimes it's like this, and sometimes it dips, and sometimes it goes up. And sometimes people come to me and say, oh, I had this awful day. I don't know if I'm healing because I just, was broke down in Costco.
Wow.
And I say, you know what? It's your journey.
Yeah.
Now, that's the process. You are healing.
Right.
You're coming and you're talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Give us a break.
Right.
Right?
So rather than thinking, okay, I'm, this is pre-tragedy or pre-loss,
right,
and the goal is to end up here.
Right.
The goal is to find that new normal in that journey and to realize that loss, not that you let it define you, but it does sort of become a part of you.
Right.
And yeah.
And when you can talk about your loss without running from it, like I can talk to you about my mom and stuff like before. I didn't want to talk because I didn't want to cry, or I thought I was going to go under with it.
Right.
But when I know I'm healing is because I can laugh about it, all the good times. I can talk about it. I can, say, today is Easter, and I'm having a rough time because I used to get a card every year from her, and I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
But you know what? All the great memories I had with her too.
Yeah.
And all the stuff I've learned and the blessings I got. There are blessings coming through grief, actually.
Yeah. So in some ways, and I know we say these cliche things, but especially when it comes to a death, that person does stay with you, and when you can kind of hold them in that healthy place, right? That you still share their memories, and I'm sure you probably part of that process is you have to surround yourself with safe people, right? I mean, just like we do in normal relationships, right? But where we can still, rather than trying to forget that person, forget the pain, they become part of this new part of us.
They what our goal is to basically work through, process, let go of the loneliness, the isolation, the grief, the hurt, so that we can embrace the good stuff.
Yeah.
The love, the relationship, because in every relationship is a good, bad, and ugly.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're so stuck in our pain because it was traumatic. Maybe it's not a death. Maybe it's a divorce, or maybe it's a disconnection from somebody that you once loved and had a great relationship and it turned.
Yeah.
So we need to process that so that because I think the biggest grief for a lot of people is the grief of not grieving the pain because they're like, they want to run from them.
Right,
That's like they're glad that guy is out of their life, right?
Right.
It's what keeps them stuck is the good stuff.
Yeah.
The woulda, coulda, shouldas.
Well, and again, I think we have this tendency to go either all bad, all good, right?
Yes.
And again, so what I hear you saying is that healing process is that in between where, yes, we can acknowledge the pain and the bad, but we can also say, gosh, I'm not married to this man anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but we had a lot of great times, and there is good, and he's a good man. Maybe that's even a great way to walk through divorce, is to really try to maintain that. Right.
And that's a good point, because that's what we do. We walk through the whole relationship. Because a lot of times I'm stuck in that pain, and I forgot there were good times.
Yeah.
I forgot that guy or that gal was
you loved him, and when you married him.
Yeah.
Right?
Instead of beating myself, say, how did I end up with this guy? And I can say, oh, I get it now.
Right.
I know why I ended up. Look at the good stuff.
Yeah.
And look what he brought. And yes, there's pain, and I have to grieve it all, because otherwise I'm only grieving a piece of them.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me stuck.
Yeah. I know, Rosie, in fact, I know you recently started doing a workshop with for parents and teens, and that's obviously a real hot topic. And again, it may be something that we have to revisit at another time. But can you briefly talk about that? Because again, we have, a lot of our audience are empty nesters, but a lot of them have teens, and just with everything, the suicides and everything.
Such a high thing.
Yeah, can you just comment a little bit on that?
Well, I call it monkey see, monkey do. Mm-hmm. We only teach what we know. Mm-hmm. And so it's really hard as mothers and fathers and just people in general, grandparents, whatever, to see our children suffer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so painful.
It's so painful. And we, and we only can teach what we know. So if we've been given Band-Aids, we give Band-Aids.
Yes.
And so our children today don't know how to grieve. Yeah. And they can go over, there's like, they say 40, 43 losses in a lifetime that you can have, and it doesn't have to do with death.
Yeah.
Our children are dealing with being rejected from sports. Yes. Our children are dealing with friends stop talking to them, or girlfriends break up, or boyfriends. Our children are dealing with divorce. Parents, our children are dealing with, the teachers dying or moving schools.
Yeah. Or disconnected parents from them, right?
Yes. Yeah, all that. Or brothers not being close, or whatever. There's a lot of loss going on in our life, everyday life. Good and bad, what we talked about. Yeah. So what I really want is to teach the parents, adults, counselors, people in general that have contact with our kids to be that village that we need so desperately to be. Back in the day, back east, I remember growing up back east a little bit before I moved here, all the parents were kind of your parent.
Oh yeah, you played in the neighborhood.
Right.
You went out to play, right?
If you were sad, they were over there giving you an ice cream cone and talking to you or whatever. You know what I mean? And they were telling your mom, "Hey, I saw so and so," and I'm like wondering, is he okay?
Yeah.
They cared.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to see today. Is that we care enough. We don't, and so that how do we do that? We have to learn how to respond to them, how to allow them to grieve, how to validate them. Right. And not analyze them, criticize them, or judge them, or tell them not to feel. We're so busy telling people not to feel.
I just heard this great quote called, and it was a love, and I'm not going to say it exactly, but the gist of it was love pays attention.
I like that.
Isn't that good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're not myopic, which so often, which is so different, because we think love is all about me and how it makes me feel.
Right.
But love always has eyes that look out. And I think that's what you're saying with our children, right? That we can come alongside maybe that busy single mom.
Right.
We can pay attention to the other kids that our kids are playing with when we're carpooling. Right, we can listen in on those conversations, ask questions.
Right, exactly, because we're affected by, our surroundings, our environment. We're affected, and why can't we be people to, care about, hearts, I always say wounded hearts help wounded hearts. We heal with each other.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's part of just the human experience, isn't it?
The human
experience.
Yes.
So I know we probably are pushing close to 20 minutes. So Rosie, tell us a little bit about, you are in the Temecula area. Tell us about your services and maybe some of the classes or resources that our audience could potentially tap into.
Well, I have a couple different programs, and one is really popular is the Grief Recovery Program that works with dealing with all losses. So I'll have a group of people that not just by death, but there might be somebody died, somebody got divorced, lost, the children are moved on, careers have changed, all kinds of things. And we take an 8-week education group and assignments every week.
Wow.
And we go into our belief systems, what got us stuck, how we ran from our grief, what got us in trouble, and then go into what the losses are that we have. And then deal with one particular one in those 8 weeks and follow it all the way through with assignments and basically complete the emotional incompleteness that was left.
That. Okay. Yeah.
And then I also offer, actually it was a group that recommended me doing this because they were so into it, a 6-month follow-up to continue doing their work, because what they realized, they had a lot of losses they hadn't completed.
So is this out after the 8 weeks and they continue for 6 months? They can
continue for, it's another 6 weeks.
Oh, 6 weeks.
And I do have an alumni group that I give, it's a free service also with that, but I think that more people were saying they'd rather have the 6-week follow-up. And they rather have skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then I also do the adults helping children grieve, and I also offer individual for those people that don't want to do group, that are shy. And even in my groups, they're small so that it's not so intimidating, and we pair up in partners. So they don't really have to, if they're like fearful or just, apprehensive.
It's probably something great about that group setting because you're there sort of with safe people who are brave and are willing to work through things, right?
Yes.
So those are all things where people have to be present, right? You don't do like anything online. You need to do something online.
I know.
You need to expand your reach there.
People have asked me. I can give people resources in their area if they want to find people that do my work in other areas.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
I have that resource. But the other thing too is I know that a lot of people are doing more online stuff. I personally have to get used to embracing it. The only reason I haven't done it is because grief to me is such a personal, intimate thing.
That is so true.
And to have somebody in the, on a screen here, it's just not the same yet.
Right.
When I have somebody like us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it is such an intimate thing.
It is.
I think that's part of our problem. We kind of think this is intimate when this is intimate, right?
Exactly.
Maybe that's part of the whole healing process is have good friends.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. If we can teach friends to be like, to know, because we are good friends, we just don't have the skills because we're learned from the past how to do that for
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rosie, I could just go on talking for hours and hours. So we're going to go ahead. Do you have any of those classes coming up?
Well, right now I have the adult. I have, it started today from 10 to 11:30. It's on Tuesdays. It's for the next 7 weeks. We can have people come in as late as next week, and then I close it. I start it, I give them a couple sessions to start, and then we close it.
Okay, and that's specifically for helping the teens.
Right, teens and children. And then I also have one October 25th coming for people that want to do their own healing work for 8 weeks.
Okay.
Coming up on a Thursday for 8 weeks, starting October 25th.
In the evenings?
In the evenings.
Okay, all right. And can we make sure we get links and post those?
Yeah, I can do that for you, yes.
Okay, that'd be great. And if people were interested, they could just go to the link and sign up.
Yes, or I can leave my phone number as well.
And you do private work too.
And if they wanted to come in for a 30-minute consultation that's free, they can, and we can just see if we're meshed, and I can tell them what I do and see if it fits for them.
Awesome.
Right?
So we'll get all that information posted, and again, any of you that are listening, you can also post questions, and I'll make sure that Rosie, if she doesn't notice it, I'll say, hey, Rosie, you got some questions? Here, answer them. So in wrapping things up, give us some kind of some final thoughts.
Well, we were talking about quotes, right?
Yes.
And there's one, and I don't want to chop it up, but because I love it, but it says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
That is so
And that's
true.
my Aunt Angela. I love her. She has some wonderful quotes. Yes. And then I also like Gandhi. He said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world.
Wow.
I love those too.
Yeah.
So many quotes when we were talking. I hear you talk about quotes. There's so many that I could do a list.
Well, and again, both of those just talk about being willing to enter into other people's grief and pain and share that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there was somebody that said, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah. That's awesome.
and love that. Yeah.
Well, Rosie, it has been an absolute delight. I hope you all have been as blessed as I have, and we will get those resources down for you and reach out if you need anything, and we will definitely have Rosie back.
Thank you so much. And you know what? I just love what you're doing. I love it. Reaching out to the women in this community and people. It's just so...
I am so blessed because people are like, Karen, you have the best friends. I'm like, I know the most wonderful people, and I want to share them with you, and that's my heart. So blessings to you all.
Thank you. Bye.